Hi, everybody. Welcome to our bi-weekly Hangout on Air series. I'm Krista Seiden, Analytics Advocate for Google. And today I'm joined by Breen Baker, who is a product manager for Google Analytics, and also remotely from London, Rhys Cater, who is a platform specialist for Google Analytics as well. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. I'm really excited about this topic because today we're talking about BigQuery and Google Analytics, forecasting for business success. So I know the two of you did a session on this at our summit, and it was really popular, quite a hit. And we also did a poll in the GA Premium community asking people the type of content that they wanted. And far and away, everybody was asking for BigQuery. So I think this is going to be really great. I'm very excited. So let's go ahead and dig in. But before we do that, a reminder, as always, to submit your questions. So you can do that two ways. You can either do that via the Hangouts on Air chat box that you guys should all see on your windows right now, or you can use the form. So there's a short link there in the slide deck for the form. There's also a link to the same form in the invite for this HOA. So go ahead and submit your questions. We would love to answer them at the end of this HOA. And with that, let's take a look at the agenda. So we're going to start with an introduction to the GA Premium export schema. And then we're going to look at a sample query around content grouping in BigQuery. And after that, we're going to get a little bit more in depth, and we're going to go into a customizable cohort analysis in BigQuery. So kind of that next step of the types of analysis and the really powerful things that you can do in BigQuery. And then at the end, I think Rhys and Breen have something very special for us where they are calculating lifetime value using BigQuery and some pretty cool data science stuff. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Breen, and we're going to dive in.
Awesome. Thanks, Krista. So we'll get into the meat of it in a second. I'll turn it over to Rhys, but allow me to kind of set the narrative for a second. So you may have heard this before, but we, and when I say we, I mean Google, we like to see the world that we live in, the world where we interact with consumers day in and day out, as a series of micro moments. And these are moments where the customer intent is at its peak, where the right message delivered at the right time in that right context can push the user over from intent into purchase. We've all heard this before. This isn't anything new. But prior to having advanced big data systems, these advertising paradigms would evaluate these consumer life cycles in terms of days and weeks, or in terms of groups of users or regions of users, not as individuals. But now with digital advertising and big data in the state that it is today, we can begin to see this world much more granularly. So with this evolution of marketing, we're getting from macro to micro. So what that means is we're moving from a world where we can understand what a group of users did yesterday to a new world where we can understand what an individual user is most likely to do tomorrow. This has been the holy grail of marketing for forever. And I was working on this vision when I joined the industry about a decade ago, and still working on it today. But I can finally say that today we're starting to see this be realized, not only by the big players with a ton of money able to invest in this space, but we're starting to see the types of managed solutions like BigQuery that enable smaller, mid-sized, and some large that didn't have the resources, companies to actually make use of this vision. But in order to take advantage of that world, we need a single holistic repository of raw user data. Raw because we need to have that level of granularity for statistical analysis. We also need the ability to apply statistical analysis and predictive analysis across all of these different data sets. So we need a tool that will enable us to do that. And we also need a place to validate these results and to do it in a collaborative way so that we can all agree on the insights and move forward quickly together and take action. So the foundational need here is to have that holistic repository of raw user data. Unfortunately, for most of us today, our data landscape is fragmented and disjoint. So different data sets about our users live in different siloed databases. For example, your online data store isn't aware of that a customer called about a recent purchase that they made. Your call center doesn't know of the product categories that your client is most interested in based on their most recent browser history. Your CRM system doesn't know about the predicted lifetime value that you've calculated in your core reporting UI. And your loyalty program isn't aware of the actions that your clients take with your partners. So BigQuery can help here by enabling to get all of your data under that single, secure, and universally accessible place, i.e. the cloud, with standard ways of joining that data together to make sense of it. And bringing this data together in one place enables this type of analysis that up until recently was really a dream for most of you and for most of us. But BigQuery is far more than just a data store where you can join data. BigQuery also opens up the ability for predictive statistical analysis. This can enable us not only to take action on an individual client's trends, but to use the insights across all of our customers to predict the purchasing probabilities that cannot be intuited by a single user or even a group of users like a company. For example, we may know that from basic web analytics that customers like automotive products. And of course, we should be delivering them deals and promotions in that product vertical. But statistical analysis can tell us that clients that like automotive products also like baseball. And predictive analysis can tell us that those same clients have a 63% chance of buying automotive products related to their favorite team. Without predictive and statistical analysis, these opportunities would be left on the table. And lastly, statistical analysis is very complex, and that's to say the least. And to many of us, it's a black box. I have an engineering degree, and individual statistical analyses to me are a black box. So data goes in, insights come out, and most of us are left just kind of holding the bag, expected to act on those insights without really a full understanding of the process or a full sense of trust in where that data is coming from. What Rhys will be demoing later in this session, he'll show you a new capability that allows analysts and data scientists to document, validate, collaborate, and share all of their processes from data ingestion, statistical analysis, straight on through where this data is being pumped out for your action engines. This new collaborative space will facilitate greater team cohesion and confidence in the statistical insights from the statistical analysis, and will ease the burden on our analysis teams from having to prove that these things are right, and will get us to quicker action and greater agility. So in summary, BigQuery facilitates the evolution of businesses from macro to micro. It helps us move from that disparate set of data to that holistic repository of user understanding. It enables us to up-level our analysis from human intuition based on simple behavioral patterns to predictive analysis based on statistical patterns. And it turns the traditionally black box nature of statistical analysis into a collaborative, shared, and validated experience. Okay, so great, right? We get it. This is good, right? We get the theoretical power and value of using BigQuery and bringing all this data under one house and running statistical analysis. But how do we actually get that done inside the cloud ecosystem, right? That's what we're all here for today. And for that, really, I will turn it over to Rhys. He's the specialist. He'll be able to show you some really cool things that we're doing. But before we get to that, I did want to introduce a couple new things that we've launched recently. One is our AdWords integration, and the other is our intraday export. So for AdWords, what we've added to the export schema is the GCL ID. This is the canonical AdWords ID that associates all campaigns with refers onto business websites. In this integration, we're exporting that ID along with all the other metadata already inside GA that's associated with that ID. So we're not exporting any new AdWords information. We're also not exporting any AdWords information that isn't associated with a click to your website. But what we are doing is we're facilitating through one integration your ability to do ads and website statistical analysis from day one. It may, sorry, did you have a question?
I was going to say, so basically everything that you see in the user interface right now for GA that's coming from that AdWords integration is now available at the hit level in BigQuery.
Exactly. Everything that you could see in GA. However, as Rhys will get into, your ability to use that data and to manipulate it and to make broader insights and conclusions that GA, the tool, really isn't that set up for, will always be there in BigQuery. So BigQuery will give you, yes, what you have in GA, but you can do a lot more than what you can just do inside of GA. The other addition we've made is our intraday export. So what this is it's exactly what it sounds like. We're exporting data for today. And we're doing that on a regular basis, about 8 hours, with the final export coming a few hours after the end of the day, so that that final export contains all of the data up till 12 for that final day.
So it used to be just once a day, right, at the end of the day, and there was lag. So this is a significant improvement.
Yes. So we've basically taken your access to data for today from about a 36-hour lag down to about a 4-hour lag. So that data should now be in your inbox, so to speak, in the BigQuery project before you get to work.
That's awesome. So with intraday hits, there's also the concept of a late hit, right? Could you explain that?
Yeah. So just for anyone who doesn't know, a late hit is a hit that's served after the hit should have been served by virtue of the browser the user is using being offline. A typical example of this is I'm browsing, I'm looking at a particular news article on my phone as I enter the subway. I get too deep into the subway and my phone disconnects from the internet. Now your phone doesn't turn off, the page is still there, and I'm still able to look through that news content. I'm still able to click on things and do some slight browsing. While I'm doing that, the browser on your phone is saving that information, saving those hits up for when it eventually I come out of the subway, reconnect with the internet, all those hits will be sent off. Now that was a simple example spanning maybe a half an hour. These types of situations can actually span hours and days, which I know is a rare case, but in some situations you will see late hits coming in after the day is actually complete. Now the reason Krista brought this up, the reason this is important is because we've stopped exporting the intraday exports at 12. But for some of our clients, we are allowing late hits to come into our general processing pipeline, i.e. they'll show up in the core GA UI, and we process some late hits for a few hours after that day. Now the intraday export will not have those late hits. The final daily export that still arrives a number of hours later will have those, but the intraday won't. So if you're using the intraday as your like canonical source of truth and you're validating that against the GA UI, you will notice some discrepancies associated with those late hits. If you're using intraday to steer your personalization, your optimization, your bid targeting engines, that will be totally fine. That information is up to date, and you'll be able to act on that.
And that makes sense because, I mean, if something's coming in after we've already sent the intraday upload, we can't know about that.
There's not much we can do, right?
At the end of the day, when everything's come in, we have that little window, and then we finally send out the final daily upload, then that's your source of truth.
Correct.
Great.
So with that, we can pass it off to Rhys to get into the really deep and interesting stuff that I know you guys are all waiting for.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Breen and Krista, and hi everyone. That was a great intro from Breen. Thanks for setting the scene. What we're going to do in this second part of the Hangout is look through some of the steps that we'll be taking in BigQuery and how we can build up to that vision of finally bringing all of our disparate data sets together, analyzing them at scale, and really getting actionable insights out of them. If we jump onto the next slide, what we'll take a look at is the kind of workflow that we're ultimately working towards, and which I'll be showing you at the very end of this session, an example of the type of analysis we could get out of a workflow such as this. What we're going to want to be doing is taking these data sets that live in various different places for many organizations at the moment, our Google Analytics, our CRM data, our marketing data, other data sources which may well be siloed, and finding a way to bring them together, so integrating those sources. Once they are in a place where we can access them all together, which is the first hurdle to overcome, we'll really want to start doing some heavy-duty analysis on them, so have them in an environment where we can perform kind of programmatic statistical analysis. And what we'll finally want is for those results to be put into a place where they're accessible by all of our different systems, our CRM systems, our sales systems, our call centers, to really make them actionable, to make the results of those analyses actionable. And much of this can be done within the Google ecosystem, within the cloud ecosystem. Examples of that we'll be seeing in the demo to come. But first of all, a little bit of background if we jump into the next slide. And again, why are we not using the Google Analytics kind of core reporting APIs or even the interface to do this type of analysis? All of us here hopefully know why the Google Analytics interface is so popular and so kind of loved. It's because it makes analysis and access to data really easy, really user-friendly. It's really quick to go in and get insights out. And for the majority of your needs, it's your one-stop shop to go in and get answers quickly, to get data quickly. It really helps with data democratization, across organizations, because anyone in any function can go in and get some insight out. With that user friendliness comes some limitations. For example, we don't have access to really raw hit level data. The data is typically kind of aggregated and made easy to access in the interface. Without that access to really kind of log level data, it's a little bit more difficult to perform really granular analysis, as we're going to be doing. Secondly, it's not quite so straightforward to integrate that data with other data sets in the Google Analytics interface. We'd have to export via the API and then use that CSV file that we get to merge with other data sets. In BigQuery, our data is already there and ready to be queried using an SQL-like language, which is already going to be familiar and common to people working on big data and to data scientists. So let's jump into the next slide and just have a look at a couple of things that BigQuery offers to overcome the challenges. First of all, we're getting very, very granular data. We'll take a little look at an example in a moment of the actual schema that we're getting out of the BigQuery export for Google Analytics, and a little bit of the lay of the land when it comes to the data that we'll be working with. And secondly, BigQuery is designed, and the BigQuery export was designed with the objective in mind that we'd be able to easily integrate this data with other sources, either in the cloud platform or elsewhere. Okay, let's take a quick look at the live demo. I think we're going to jump into looking at some of this and getting a little bit hands-on. I'm going to have to share my screen. Okay, here we go. So what we're taking a look at here, just to start with the basics, in the last kind of 10-15 minutes here of the demo itself, we'll be working our way up from the very basics, from looking at just what we're getting and the lay of the data, all the way through to the kind of most advanced stuff that we can be doing, which is this statistical analysis workflow that we looked at just a moment ago. But in order to get there, and there'll be people attending this hangout of various different skill levels, we'll have people who are really just starting off their journey with the BigQuery export, all the way up to people who are already getting pretty advanced. So we're going to start at the bottom just to give people a flavor of what's possible and how we can get started with the data and get comfortable with the data, and work all the way up to some of the more advanced stuff to give you some inspiration about how to take the analysis to the next level. What I'll start by saying is this, this is the BigQuery interface for anyone who hasn't yet jumped in. And what we're looking at here is one of the tables that will be exported from Google Analytics Premium into BigQuery. We get these daily tables exported as well as the intraday tables, which are a brilliant new addition that Breen just took us through. And we won't walk through everything we get in the schema right now. We have some documentation that's linked to at the end of this deck to have a look at. But maybe just to highlight some of the differences in the type of data we're getting in the export schema versus the interface itself. To start with, we're getting some granular data such as the visit ID, and also right down at the bottom here, the full visitor ID. So we can really drill down in our queries to visit or visitor level, and really easy kind of build up our data using those fields. We get some additional data that's not available in the interface, such as the visit start time, a timestamp, so we can be very specific with our timings. And there's the AdWords stuff that Breen just introduced us to as well, which is quite new to the schema. And then finally, one of the really powerful things about this export schema is the really granular hit level data that we're getting. And we can see the fields here that are available. Just to give you a little flavor, we've got the hit number, for example, which is a number that increments hit by hit. So we can very easily see in a session exactly the order in which things occurred and build up queries based on the ordering of our hits, as well as other really granular level data, interaction hits, all the page information, and all the other things you'd expect out of the GA export. And what we'll jump into here is a really basic query just to show you how this type of data really differs from what we'd see in the interface. in the interface, if we take a simple question such as, can we look at an individual visitor and see exactly what they did in order on a specific day, including all types of hits, page views and events and transactions, and just lay it out in a table with a bunch of dimensions all at once. That is actually relatively challenging. It's not designed for that type of analysis. Most people don't need to go into that level of detail on a regular basis. Whereas in BigQuery, that type of question is really easy to answer. Here we're looking at a very specific full visitor ID and visit ID, and just taking a look at all the hits that happened in a particular visit or session right here in a flat table. So we can see this session, for example, included a page view followed by some event type hits indicating that the user read an article on the website. The data set we're looking at here is from a publisher website with articles, so we're looking at data about how users are engaging with content in this particular case. So you can already see from some of these fields, there are things that we wouldn't ordinarily have access to. They're really going over and above what we had in the interface, which is already giving us really powerful insights, but really able to drill down to the visit level and straight into our hits as well, so right down to the hit level. So the question is how we're going to use that data in a meaningful way, and how we're going to get started analyzing it and making sense of the schema. So it's not just sitting there being big data and not being actionable. It's actually being turned into something we can get some results out of. And I'm going to walk through a couple of queries just to show you how, as a beginner with BigQuery, you might get started and then build on that knowledge before getting up to the really advanced stuff. And so here is an example of the type of query that we might actually do more regularly in BigQuery, so starting to get some kind of insights out. And this example is showing us how we would do content grouping. And what we'll notice in BigQuery is it's really easy to be ad hoc, to query the data as and when we need, and to on the fly create rules and groupings and make comparisons and really kind of tailor the data to our needs. So what we've got here is a very basic SQL statement composing of a select statement where we're asking for a set of dimensions and metrics to be returned to us. Then next down we have the table that we're grabbing the data from. For anyone who doesn't know, BigQuery has this really nice function, the table date range, to select data from a range of tables at the same time. With GA, we're getting a table a day. So this function makes it really easy to just query several months of data at a time without making our query any more complex, really. In this case, we're adding some kind of limits to the query. We're filtering by type of hit, so we're looking for page views. And then we're going to kind of order and arrange our results. And what we'll notice is this query is going to execute pretty quickly. The cloud platform is really, really powerful. So we're going to get results back. I mean, this is a basic query, but as you'll see, even for more complex stuff, the results are going to come back very, very quickly. And immediately here, what we've done is run our query over 20 days worth of data or so, and grouped our content completely ad hoc according to rules that we've defined in our query, using the SQL's case when statement, a little bit like an if statement, showing how we can apply some really light logic, some light processing onto the query itself, onto the data, and starting to get some results. Similar to the type of flat table we might generate in the interface, but really starting to show us how we can use BigQuery to get into the detail and to really query in a really customizable way. But to build on this, what could we do in BigQuery that poses a little bit more of a challenge and really uses our data in a slightly more powerful way, really leveraging the granularity of the data and the power of the cloud platform. So we're going to step up to a much more complex query now. Don't be daunted. And this query is an example of cohort analysis, which is something that in this increasingly user-centric world is something that our clients, our users of Google Analytics Premium, are really keen on doing, is getting insights into how cohorts of users are behaving. And this particular example is going to show us for our publishing website how users visiting a certain section of the website, so our analytics articles, are behaving and how they're returning to the site month over month. An example application in our website and in this query of how this might lead to actionable insights is comparing this cohort analysis across different sections of the website and seeing which content is actually leading to more loyal readers. I've executed this query now. It's finished in about 7 seconds. As we pull up the results here, we can see that we're looking at our month of first read. So we're looking at people who first read an article in each given month, an article in the analytics section. And then we see going across to the right along the screen, buckets of 0 to 30 days, 30 to 60 days, 60 to 90, and how many of those users that we acquired in those months to that specific section of the site are actually being retained. So how well is this bit of the site doing at retaining users? This model, of course, is really adaptable. So for an e-commerce website, we may well want to adapt it to be data first purchase or first purchase, first purchase on the website and seeing how we retain users in that way. Or we may want to flip it entirely and do cohort analysis by campaign. So seeing which of our acquisition campaigns, which of our marketing channels are leading to the best retention in the long term. And this is super customizable. You can pick whichever criteria that you'd want and use BigQuery to perform completely customized analysis according to your to how you want to understand users and how you want to understand cohorts of people interacting with the website, interacting with and interacting online. To take this a step further, we're going to now move to the more advanced stuff. Some of the things that we talked about in the Google Analytics Summit, and again taking an example of looking at cohort analysis, but then building even further on that and using the BigQuery export to do the type of scaled, statistical, validated analysis that Breen introduced us to earlier. So this is really one of the kind of sky's the limit goals of the BigQuery export, is to get to this kind of point. What I'm going to show you is actually up on GitHub, so you guys can go and access it later. Anybody watching who's interested in doing this type of analysis and seeing how this works, this is all up on GitHub, and the link is shared in the presentation towards the end. But what this notebook then briefly about to walk you through does is it uses a platform called IPython Notebooks to take BigQuery data, bring it into a place where we can use some programmatic systems to analyze it. We're going to use Python in this case, and some Python libraries that we can use to perform data analysis, and kind of really present the results of our analysis and then push it back into BigQuery where it'll be easily accessible. And here we're going to take a cohort of users and calculate the predicted lifetime value. So really doing some predictive analysis, really getting ahead of the curve, and starting to understand how, trying to predict how our users are going to behave in future based on what we know out of the GA data already. So a brief walkthrough of how we do this. We're going to start by taking a cohort of users, and again, don't worry about following every single step of the way here, because you'll be able to walk through this, and it's documented in the notebook that we're sharing. This is one of the advantages of using a platform such as IPython Notebooks, is that we can really easily kind of validate and step through everything to make sure that it's repeatable and clear. So do go and have a look at it afterwards. But we're going to be taking a cohort of users who transacted within a certain period, and looking again at the kind of repeat transactors and their behavior over time. The longer the time period, the better. What we're going to do is we're going to take that cohort of users, those people who've had repeat transactions in that time, and using Python and the R, so statistical language R, really commonly used. We're going to use that plugin for Python and use a customer lifetime value model across the sort of data set that we're getting straight out of BigQuery, straight from GA Premium, apply the model to the data, and try and do some forecasting. So here's an example of the type of steps we'd go through before doing that analysis. We're here looking at one of the validation steps after applying the model, comparing our actual data to how the model would perform over the same time period to check that the results are closely in step. So documenting our efforts as we go along and validating them. As we step down the notebook, we'll have a look at then finally, once we're happy with that model, applying it against all of the data and getting back a dump of data with our visitor IDs and the expected lifetime transactions and expected kind of engagement over the customer lifetime of each of our visitors based on the cohort of data that we took out at the beginning. Finally, once we have that set, once we've done some statistical analysis, we've used R, we've run this through our Python libraries to get the results. We're going to want to plug that data back into BigQuery, in our case anyway, which is what we've done. And that allows us to really simply run a query, which you can see at the top of the screen, where we're just selecting our output data and sorting our customers by projected future revenue. So making that output of that analysis, what is quite a complex analysis flow, something that would be done by data scientists, making those results really easily accessible to anyone so that, coming back to the slide we looked at earlier, all of those other systems within the business can go back and actually access the results easily and make them actionable for either for their marketing efforts or for their customer retention efforts. This type of data would be extremely valuable, projecting what are going to be our most valuable customers in the future. Will be really valuable for retention programs such as our customer loyalty and high value customer retention programs. Really treating those customers well, so that that they value you value their custom with you. And so we walked very quickly through that kind of final example and through that notebook. But if you're interested, go and take a look. I think the takeaway that I'd really advise you to keep in mind is that this model, as much as feel free to have a look at it and to try plugging your own data in. We have some exciting developments in the cloud platform coming, meaning that almost all of this could actually be done completely within the Google ecosystem. There's a link to a sign-up form on this notebook if you're interested in getting involved and interested in doing this all within the cloud platform. You can sign up and we can try and get you involved. But do keep in mind as well that this is just one example. This is one statistical model, one workflow, one example of how we might calculate customer lifetime value based on the example data set that we're using. The sky really is the limit. So you could, once we've got our raw data, once we've got our granular data, we can really apply any kind of statistical model to that to get really customized, really business specific results out of it. And this is where the true value of BigQuery, bringing our data together and kind of analyzing it at scale, presenting it and validating it and getting customized actionable results out really comes into its own. And with that, I think I will stop presenting, and I think we have some time for some questions as well as a couple more slides with the resources that I mentioned.
Yep, thank you so much, Rhys. That was really informative. So just a quick summary of everything that you guys just talked about. We talked about extracting big data for using BigQuery export, bringing the data together into your favorite analysis and statistic tools, and taking action by sending the insights back to your marketing tools. So super, super powerful. Let's go ahead and wrap up with a resources slide just before we dive into questions. So we have a lot of great questions already coming in. Be sure to pop your questions into the HOA chat box in case you have any more. We'd be happy to take them. So resources. Let's hang on the resources slide for just a minute here because we have a few short links that I wanted to share. But as always, the support.google.com/analytics, the Analytics Help Center is there. Analytics Academy at analyticsacademy.withgoogle.com. Lots of great courses on e-commerce and GTM and mobile analytics. And then finally, we have a few short links here. So we have the BigQuery schema. We have the GitHub notebook that Rhys talked so much about. And we also have the BigQuery cookbook. So these are 3 great links for you guys to go ahead and jot down. We'll also maybe put these up in a little wrap up on the community in case you miss them here. And then as always, you can also find us on Twitter at Google Analytics. I'm at Krista Seiden. We're going to leave that slide up for just another minute. But while we do that, let's go ahead and jump into Q&A. So, Breen, I have a question for you. Well, Max has a question for you, actually. He wants to know, how do I automate both updates and exports of Google BigQuery tables to a third-party business intelligence tool where the data can be connected to other databases?
Yeah, so that's a good question. That's a common question, so I'm glad you asked it, Max. So effectively, the BigQuery data is going to arrive on or around about 36 hours after the day completes for that daily export. Because it's on or after, and also because there's no real direct hook for you guys, unless you want to set up something with IPython that Rhys was mentioning. There's no real way to easily set up an automated export when that data arrives. So typically when engineers are encountered with this situation, they use what's called a polling mechanism, which is basically the system that you want the data to live in should be asking the system that you want to get the data from, is data ready? And it basically does that on a regular basis, normally hourly or every 20 minutes. You wouldn't want to get much more faster than that because it's not necessary. Much slower than that, you might not be able to react as fast to that data. So typically what happens is you set up a polling mechanism. It's asking the system, is the data ready? Is the data ready? Is the data ready? Eventually it says yes. You grab the data and you chunk it down. You may have a period where you then don't ask that question because you know it's not going to be answered yes for a period of time, but you then again start polling the system again. So that's an effective way to make sure that you have the data within a period of time, that 20 minutes or that 1 hour block that you are querying the system from. It's not a perfect system. We certainly have heard about import and export needs from the BigQuery ecosystem, and we are looking into advancing those capabilities. But from right now, I think that's the answer, is to build a polling system from the place that you want the data from, which is hopefully a place where you more directly control the code and can do something like that. And then pull the data into your new system and send it off when you have it.
Great. All right, so we have a question from Anush, I think is how I pronounce that. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong. And I'm going to give this one to Rhys. So what are the best practices around tracking product impressions using Google Analytics and analyzing impressions and clicks using BigQuery?
Okay, thanks, Anish. So this one I think is about enhanced e-commerce data in the BigQuery export. Best practices around product impressions. This, I think, is a really good example of how we're really advancing the BigQuery export schema. It used to be the case that not all of the enhanced e-commerce dimensions and metrics were in the schema, but we've really been expanding it as quickly as we can. And we now have a dedicated field for product impressions within the BigQuery export schema. So there's within the hits field, we have hits.product.isImpression, which will allow us to actually see how many of our product type hits were impressions from products. On top of that, we have product actions within the export schema, which are indexed by action type. So for detail, for click, for checkout, etc. And so by looking at those action types, we can limit, for example, those actions just to clicks. And using those two kind of data sources, start looking at impressions and clicks in the BigQuery export and building that data out. In terms of implementation, I don't think there's anything specific you'd need to keep in mind when implementing enhanced e-commerce in terms of BigQuery. I would implement it as you always would, and the export should take care of the rest.
Great, thanks. All right, Breen. So our friend Steve asks, what time is used to report late hits? Is it the server arrival time or the client recording time?
So another good question. I'm glad we brought this up because we were just talking about late hits. I know this is a confusing topic, so hopefully we can kind of answer this and eliminate this as a question for you guys. So when a late hit comes in, we determine whether or not we accept that late hit, i.e. we determine whether or not we're going to process that late hit based on the server time. So based on the time it actually hits Google servers. So that's based on when that browser comes back online and sends that data over to us. Now, when that hit was recorded on that offline browser, it actually recorded what's called a client-side time, so the actual time the event happened in real time. So that's really how we would want to process that data. So when the data is ingested, we determine based on the server whether or not we want to process that. But when it's processed, we use the client time to see where that data should fit in to that visit or that session or whatever. So the data is accurate in terms of how it's relating to how the client actually used the website. But we do use the server time to determine whether or not we're going to process that data. So if a piece of data comes in 2 hours too late, we're just going to ignore it. It's going to fall into the ether and never be seen again.
Got it. OK, that makes sense. Thank you. Rhys, a question from Rick. Rick wants to know what steps, if any, need to be taken to prepare BigQuery to handle any new data, such as custom dimensions, custom metrics, etc., that is collected by Google Analytics Premium.
Yeah, OK, cool. So thanks, Rick. In terms of BigQuery, you don't really have to do much to prepare it for new data you're sending. For example, if you're suddenly measuring a new part of your website, or your page URLs change, or in the specific example that Rick has mentioned, if you're adding new custom dimensions or new custom metrics, those will automatically make their way into the export schema. So there's not really anything that you need to do to prepare there. Just on the topic of kind of new data, new dimensions, I'd also mention that sometimes we do add new dimensions into into Google Analytics. Some of you might have spotted the data source dimension that got added to GA recently. We sometimes see that the BigQuery export schema is slightly behind the interface in having the kind of brand new dimensions included. But as we've talked about already today, we're really keen to add all the dimensions and make sure it's as complete as possible. So we try not to be too far behind in that respect. But no, in terms of collecting new data, I don't think there's much you need to do to prepare BigQuery.
Great, thanks. So Breen, a question from Jeff. Jeff wants to know, I'm trying to understand what we can pull from GA versus push into GA.
Yeah, so this is another common question. So going back to what Rhys just said, there isn't much setup that's needed or at all, really, to get any new data that we're sending over into BigQuery. So in terms of trying to understand what data you can pull from GA, we have a link on the resources slide to the BigQuery schema. All of that data is what you get. If we are going to add something, we will add it. If you guys want to connect other data sources up to it, then that's completely on your end, and you should feel fully able to do that. In that sense, I won't get into the full, kind of custom BigQuery import. There's a bunch of help docs in the cloud ecosystem that can show you how you import new database tables into BigQuery. I would only say make sure you have a join key. So use that visitor ID or some version. If you guys are using your own user ID, use your user ID so that you can actually join that data together to make sense of it. Otherwise, you're doing always correlative analysis, and that's not as you want causational relationships. That works a lot better when you're trying to make decisions.
Right.
In terms of what you can push into GA, we actually don't have a lot of mechanisms for pushing data into GA, and that is a gap. Again, something that we take seriously and we're working on. There's kind of two general gaps I see. One is the ability to pump in other data on your user into GA via that full visitor ID or that user ID. For that, I would say you probably don't need to pump it into GA if you already have it in BigQuery. If it's a visualization aspect, then that's, we still see that as something we're moving towards. But if you just need to be able to have this data under one single house and run statistical analysis, that's really where you should be using BigQuery. But I think the biggest gap is actually, so let's say you run Rhys's analysis, you do all those steps, and you get to a good understanding of a group of users that you want to target in some new way, or you want to understand in some broader way. There's no real easy way to say, okay, export that as a segment into GA, import it into GA. There's no great way to do that. That is something that I'm working with that team on right now to consider how we can do that. But effectively, the only way to do that right now is to recreate the segment, i.e. recreate your learnings from what you've gotten in BigQuery and create that segment inside of GA. It's not perfect, like we said, but it's the best way to recreate what you're actually trying to do inside of GA. And of course, as I said, if you're actually trying to do additional statistical analysis, I would say keep that in BigQuery.
Right. So Stephen, you had a very similar question, so I hope that also answered your question. Rhys, all right, a question from Eric. Eric wants to know, what's the best way to do multi-day analysis?
Yeah, hopefully we've already answered that one. If you were listening carefully in the demo, we have the table date range function in BigQuery, which is designed for exactly this. I think a lot of people coming to BigQuery and to the GA export schema don't know about it. So you know, hopefully this will get the word out. But yeah, the table date range function is a really easy way in BigQuery to say, I want to query from this start date to this end date over all the tables. Doesn't matter if some are missing, and not have to complexify your query. If you want more information about table date range, I'd recommend just having a quick look at the BigQuery query reference, which is the developer guide online. Yeah, so take a quick look at that for any more details on how to use those kind of functions, as well as a bunch of other cool stuff in BigQuery.
Great. So we have a question from Joe. I'm going to give this one to you, Breen.
Okay.
I thought I caught something about being able to do integrated business analysis and marketing all within the Google ecosystem. If so, do you have any more details, and can you speak about that anymore?
Yes. Yes and no. So as Rhys said towards the end of his demo, the last portion of his demo, that IPython notebook, that's really what we're talking about in terms of Google kind of doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So you guys don't have to do a lot of that setup. You can basically create a notebook, jump in pretty easily. It'll directly integrate with BigQuery. You can bring in data, show it, validate it, test it against a model, you know, that kind of stuff. I can't share too much with you on that. As Rhys said, he's going to share the GitHub notebook. There is a link at the bottom to get more involved, and I'll just kind of leave it there. But basically, you know, the ecosystem we're trying to build there is one where it's easy for not just data scientists that know this in and out and can dive into this really data-intensive, really heavy analytical space, but someone who's more of an analyst, more like how I started, right? Where you have an understanding of data, you have a general understanding of how data gets joined together and how to run a query, but you don't know how to set up a web page with servers and, you know, gain resources for all of that and understand load balancing and all of that. So Google wants to flatten that all out so that an analyst has maybe not the same savvy as a statistician, but can jump in easily and begin to involve themselves in the discussion that statistician is working on. So again, if you're interested, I would say there's a link that Rhys mentioned at the bottom of that GitHub notebook. Sign up. We'll see if we can get you involved. And then once you're in, you'll be able to see a little bit more what we're talking about.
Sounds like some exciting stuff coming.
It is. It's really cool.
I would definitely sign up in that form. I'm signing up. Cool. So we have a question from Jeff. Rhys, I'm going to give this one to you. If the measure is users instead of page views, does the result add uniques, as in not desired, or count true unique users? Say if a user viewed 2 pages in a group, count it only once.
Yeah, and I think what Jeff is referring to is back to that example where we did content grouping, one of those first queries that I walked you through, and saying, you know, can we look at, you know, kind of users to the content group rather than just number of page views in total in that content group? And the answer is that, you know, yes, we can do that, and the flexibility of SQL means that it's actually pretty straightforward. What I would do, you know, I'd use in SQL the count distinct function, which, you know, as it suggests, counts kind of unique values. So we would count distinct full visitor IDs, which is our visitor identifier, and then we would simply group the results of that count by the content group. So we would basically, within each content group, count the unique full visitor IDs, which I think would give you the kind of output you're looking for, which is like users per content group, not individual page views.
Great. So I think we got time for one or two more questions. So Rhys, I'm going to give this one to you as well. From Timothy, you mentioned data source as a new dimension. What is this? I don't see it in our current schema.
Sorry if I was at all unclear. The data source was an example where we've got that dimension now in the Google Analytics interface. You can add it as a dimension to kind of custom reports and things. It's designed to show you where a hit came from, like the web or an app, where you can add a customized data source if you're using the measurement protocol, but hasn't yet worked its way into the BigQuery export schema. So you won't see it quite yet in BigQuery, but it's one of those examples.
Cool. All right, so I think we'll wrap up with this one last question, and it's from Justin, and it says, will the sample queries be shared somewhere? So I'll go ahead and answer this one. Yes, there's a link in the deck that we shared. I'm also going to go ahead and push this out to the GA Premium community. I'm going to do a little wrap-up post with a link to the video and the short links that we shared in the resources deck. And also, just a quick note, we are updating the BigQuery cookbook to include some of these examples and interesting queries that we talked about today. And I think that is probably going to continue to be updated, right, Rhys, Breen?
Yeah, I mean, it's our desire not to give you guys a complete cookbook. We don't want you to see us as telling you what's important. So we will give you some more generic examples in that cookbook, but we do want to elevate it to these more complex cohort analysis, time series analysis, things that are more complex from a SQL standpoint that we can help you guys with an example, but strongly advise you to take that and make it your own. So make sure that the content groupings or the understanding of what you care about in terms of page views, events, make sure you make that query your own. We're not trying to tell you what's right to do here. We're just trying to give you a little bit of help in diving in.
Awesome. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Breen, Rhys, I want to thank you guys so much for joining us today. Rhys especially, I think it's like 7 or 8 p.m. over there in London. So thank you. I know this has been really, really helpful for our users, and we look forward to doing even more on BigQuery in the future. So thanks again, guys.
Thanks, everybody.